Man, I am so mad I got owned by that commie in the NKVD. I need to find a way to get back at him. Wait, what is that noise I hear?
Fear not, Porky. We are the bootlicker trio at your service. Let's get you out of that KJSAP.
Bro, I literally don't know who you are at all. Though, do you know the commie who locked me in here? You look like you got a bone to pick with him.
Yeah, of course we have a problem with him. We are going to totally own him this time. I probably didn't shout enough slurs at him. Let's go now, we have no time to waste. Wait, there is someone at the door. Maybe I should get it. Bro, what is this? This is getting old now. You again, Porky?
Yeah, it's me again. I didn't expect to be here again, but the bootlicker trio freed me. This ends now.
Everyone, let's get him and show this commie once and for all. Okay then. Bring it on. Bro, watch where you're aiming.
No, how did you all get defeated that easily? What am I supposed to do now? There is no hope for us.
No, Porky, there is still one more. We have been defeated, but there is still one last hope for us ANCAPs. Go find Ross MC. The final chud. We may not have been worthy of the hero, but maybe he will be. He's the only one left who can still fight Spooky. He will save us from the commie in the name of libertarianism. Go. Now. Find Ross MC. Man, I am having a good time doing nothing productive while receiving transcripted messages transmitted from Rigel with my soft. Wait, what is this notification? So it begins. Really? Now? Well, I've been waiting for this chance for too long. I suppose I should get my things and start heading out. So, what seems to be the problem here?
Phew,
Porky?
we are all wet with rain now, but I finally finished digging the grave for the bootlicker trio. They all got beaten while trying to fight Spooky Scary Socialist. It was a horrible battle, and I barely escaped alive. Ubersoy told me you were the final hope for us ANCAPs. Will you help me defeat this communist?
Okay, fine, I will go and see what I can do. But I'm not doing this for free. What's in it for me if I decide to join this turf war?
What? Do you need anything from me?
Dude, we're literally capitalists. You should have known this was coming. And besides, why does everyone think I am an ANCAP? I just wear this patch for decoration. I don't think anarcho-capitalism is viable.
Okay. I will give you some of my capital in the form of this random cryptocurrency I made up. Another fine example of capitalist innovation. If you can defeat that commie for me in a debate, you can keep it. Just look at what you're wearing now. No wonder everyone calls you an ANCAP.
Okay, then, in that case, let's go and I'll take care of him. Okay, bro. Seriously? Again? This is tiring. No way anyone still wants to challenge me. Okay, now who is this? Reddit's strongest warrior? Are you even a real person? How is anyone going to take you seriously like this? Do you really unironically think showing up with a helmet, logic hammer, and nerf will help?
Silence commie. Yes, you may have defeated the trio of bootlickers, but the final hope of ANCAPs will defeat you for sure. Your final challenger approaches. Will you accept?
Bro, Porky, shut up. You're acting even more corny than me. What I meant to say was, I just want to have a peaceful talk about this whole communism thing. I'm not here to fight. This logic hammer and gun is just for show. Let's go and actually have a discussion. Yeah, so I'm actually not even sure why everyone thinks I'm a cringy ANCAP. I know my first impression was definitely corny, but I assure you that's not how I actually talk. I actually just genuinely want to know why you think this is the best way forward. Yeah, I can't remember when an anti-communist actually tried to do anything else, other than fight me immediately. Well, we'll just have to see where this goes.
So I was deep in the rabbit hole of people arguing over politics using video essays, as one does, when I found this video by some guy named Spooky Scary Socialist, and in it he promises to debunk every single anti-communist argument. Now, I'm not one to turn something like this down, so I had to watch it. But then I realized all of the debunkings that I was promised turned out to be rushed, and at best, were poorly researched, and at worst, were actively ignoring facts that did not suit his narrative. But what really drove me to make this video wasn't even that, because I've seen too much of that before. What really made me want to make this video was just how unbelievably smug he sounded while talking. This entire video, and in fact a lot of his other content, just comes up as condescending, because he completely refuses to view most other viewpoints as anything other than capitalist propaganda. This isn't your typical commie owned by facts and logic refute, because I believe those videos, while funny at times, only end up contributing to discouraging honest discussion and may only serve to encourage entrenching into beliefs instead of reflecting on them. If I made this video a year ago, maybe I would have made such a video, but I am burned out of endless raging and debating, and want to make something calmer for a change. If you want to hear someone swearing and roasting the other side, then don't watch this video. Throughout this video, I'll be going over every serious argument in this video, and explain what I think of each one. If you couldn't already tell, yes, I am right-leaning, but I'm also not fully defending capitalism here. If anyone else finds a problem with my opinions or any claims made in here, then by all means I welcome them to bring it up with me in the comments. Don't be shy, or even better, make another response video to this one. If that happens, I know how I'll reach the right people. Just don't attack or harass anyone mentioned, as this is meant to be made in the spirit of good faith. And if Spooky Series Socialist is watching, before you continue watching, I'd recommend that you react to this on your monthly live stream, because then I'll be able to attend and see what you think of this.
If you're one of those people who instinctively reject any idea of socialism or communism and just yell some overused line to debunk it without engaging in a discussion, you're probably not going to like this video.
I guess it's a good thing then that I am willing to engage in a proper discussion. With that said, let's get to the first argument.
Basically, the argument goes that socialism is whenever the government does anything, so everything related to the government is socialist. Following this logic, libraries, welfare, fire departments, garbage removal, streetlights, policemen, the military, the CIA, FBI, and prisons are all socialist. Hopefully everyone can agree libraries are good, but grouping these things with the military, police, and prisons is ridiculous. And while I agree that normalizing socialism is good, at the same time it's not good to basically deprive it of all meaning. So, what is socialism? Well, it's common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. Related to that is communism, which is a stateless, classless, and moneyless society with common ownership of the means of production. But wait, wasn't the Soviet Union and all those other places communist? How could they be when there was still a state? Well, they were run by communist parties, so they are in the sense that they were trying to achieve it, but strictly speaking, they hadn't achieved a communist society.
Admittedly, this first argument is not really an argument and is more of a clarification. Some actually believe that socialism is when the government does anything, and I'm glad that he cleared this up, because I too agree that we shouldn't rob it of all meaning. And we're gonna need all the clarity we need to get through this, since I still have to discuss 10 more arguments.
They image that comes to most people's mind when the communists or socialists talk about wanting more equality is that of a bland, boring dystopia where everyone is forced to be equal. Communism would essentially force everyone to become part of a hive mind, or at least is how the general idea goes. However, the idea that more equality means suppressing the talented elite to the common level of the masses is just wrong. When communists say we want more equality, they mean freeing the masses so they can unleash their suppressed talents. After the October Revolution, there was a flourishing of art, culture, and creativity. The Futurist movement, legalization of divorce for women, and the growth of cinema were exciting developments compared to the Tsar's regime over the masses of people. It turns out liberating millions of people from the clutches of capital creates an exciting, artistic society, not one where everyone is forced to be a hive mind and conform to some incorrect, abstract idea of equality. Meanwhile, in capitalism, schools prepare students for a lifetime of work, while workers have to become mindless drones in jobs that a majority of them hate. Any sort of excitement or interest is usually reserved for the rich and powerful, while the rest of us go on with our boring lives.
While I do think the argument that communism will turn society into some kind of dystopian hive mind seems a little overblown, he then goes on to claim that capitalism is already a dystopia, and arguably even more so because the masses are forced into working for decades in jobs they hate. And he's also now claiming communism will liberate the masses' suppressed talents to form a more artistic and vibrant society. This sounds good on paper, but it seems that he has forgotten how society actually works. Even if theoretically you could liberate everyone, it's not like everyone can do absolutely everything they want all the time. Someone still needs to grow food, ship it, keep the power plants running, etc. You're still going to have to get people to do those things just for society to continue functioning. This argument could just as easily be applied to communism. For example, what about the workers forced to work in depressing towns in the middle of nowhere in Siberia, choked by the constant pollution floating downwind? In the end, this argument is really just not relevant at all, since this isn't a problem inherent to either capitalism or communism, and neither vindicates nor demonizes either side.
People worse off have to deal with the growing ecological disasters that are literally killing them and destroying their homes, while the rich profit off ignoring any sort of sustainable solution.
Pollution and climate change aren't things inherent to either capitalism or communism. They are just a consequence of human development regardless of ideology, and we can work to fix these issues without descending into ideological warfare, so this is completely irrelevant to the subject at hand. And for those who think communism is still inherently better for the planet, I invite you to go visit the Aral Sea.
I've already dealt with the topic of death counts, specifically concerning Stalin, in a previous video. Needless to say, when scholars looked at actual archival evidence released from the Soviet Union, they found that death counts were actually much lower than what was previously estimated.
I don't think I need to explain why the supposed death count of communism would seem much lower when taken from the USSR itself.
The paper, Victims of the Soviet Penal System in the Pre-War Years, found that many of the previous estimates of historians were based on guesses, rumors, or extrapolations from isolated local observations. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I covered in the full video, but the point is, the death count of communism, which includes Stalin, tend to be overblown and exaggerated to gain more attention. A lot of the 100 million stuff comes from the Big Black Book of Communism, which was deliberately bloated to come to a nice round number.
Now, is the supposed 100 million figure by the Black Book of Communism exaggerated? To a near certainty, yes, as 100 million is a suspiciously perfect number, but not by very much, honestly.
This conversation about victims of communism, of course, ignores the millions of deaths under capitalism from poverty, hunger, exposure, and imperialist war. We have more than enough resources to give food, water, and treat curable diseases for everyone in the world. It's capitalism that refuses to provide these things because they aren't profitable.
And now this guy is just deflecting and saying, oh wait, but capitalism actually killed more people. Yes, it's true that imperialism and colonialism has led to mass death and suffering in the past, but ask yourself, do we see anything in recent history like what happened to the Congo in the 1800s? I'm not saying we should excuse these atrocities, I'm just here to acknowledge that our civilization has learned from them, like we should have, and capitalists aren't going around chopping hands off for not meeting rubber quotas anymore. And for the argument that in the current day capitalism refuses to provide basic needs because they aren't profitable, in the developed world, we have something called welfare, which surprisingly can exist parallel to capitalism without fully turning into communism. I'm not saying welfare is perfect, I'm simply trying to say that capitalist systems, for the most part, don't simply leave people to die because feeding them would be unprofitable. And for the developing world, think about all the times we sent aid only for it to be stolen by warlords or middlemen or something. That's corruption, not capitalism. In the end, it's not about how many people communism or capitalism killed. It's about whether or not the system can adapt to stop killing so many people. In capitalist systems, we can still put systems in place like regulation and free press, so that if a factory owner mistreats the workers, for instance, we can know what's up and take action to stop it. Yes, our capitalist systems are still far from perfect, and we still have to work out issues such as resource exploitation or sweatshops. But it's the ability to change that I'm focusing on here, not pure death counts as a measurement of morality. When we criticize communism for killing millions, we aren't doing it just because it killed millions. We're criticizing their inability to adapt to stop killing people. Look at North Korea and think to yourself if they have learned much at all. And while I am aware leftist policies and systems are just as capable of reform and reflection, after all, look at all the countries that were willing to change when communism wasn't entirely working out. For this video, we'll be focusing on communism, the most hardcore form of this ideology that just refuses to change. When communist countries do change, they just end up inevitably switching to capitalism even if the ruling class stays the same. There goes the Western meddling argument out the window. If you have to fully switch out the system to change at all, that's a good sign that it was too rigid to work with originally.
George Orwell's Animal Farm has probably done more to poison the discourse on communism than any other book. It's annoying to talk about any sort of leftist policy and just get Animal Farm yelled at you.
This argument is really just an ad hominem against Orwell, but I'll still address it here. He states that anti-communists will just shout Animal Farm to shut down any discussion on communism, but I've yet to see any instances of this happening.
It completely ignores the material reality that the Soviet Union had to face, namely the invasion of 14 capitalist nations that defined its policy going forward. It also has sweeping reductions of history, combining Marx and Lenin into the same character, completely missing Lenin's important contributions to the revolution, and instead pinning them on the character representing Trotsky.
Yes, Animal Farm has inaccuracies, but then again, the man wasn't writing a history book, he was writing a fairy story.
In addition, Orwell himself was a racist and a snitch. While hypocritically complaining about Big Brother, he reported communists to the secret police and provided them with lists of names. Orwell somehow thought he was brave by speaking out against the Soviet Union, when in reality, he was just another tool of the bourgeoisie. If you have criticisms of the Soviet Union or communism and cite The Little Mermaid, sorry to say, but I'm not going to take you seriously.
Then he just labels Orwell as a racist and a snitch, and yes, he was racist, but then again, almost everyone was racist back then. Now, just because everyone was racist doesn't make racism any more acceptable by a long shot, but it just meant Orwell wasn't special in that regard. Now, was Orwell above criticism? Absolutely not. In the end, he was just a human writing about what he observed and experienced for other humans. You can find issue with his work or himself if you want, but you can't simply dismiss all of his ideas because of his flaws. And about the Orwell list that people love to cite to discredit him, yes, it's true that Orwell reported and made a list of suspected communists, and I'm absolutely not saying that in any way was a good thing. However, this guy acts as though Orwell was snitching on thought criminals and handing them over to the thought police, when in reality, he wasn't making the list out of pure spite. He was simply making the list for a friend who was working in a department tasked with producing anti-communist propaganda. The list was simply listing people he thought were unsuitable to work in that department, not people he thought should be sent to room 101. The list is just something hardcore critics of Orwell tend to blow way out of proportion. And even if he was a more serious snitch, that still doesn't disqualify all of his anti-totalitarian ideas. They're still relevant today for very good reasons. And I also find it funny that communists will try to claim Orwell was a tool of the bourgeoisie, while ignoring the fact that he was literally a socialist and fought with a Marxist militia. Of course, communists usually try to claim democratic socialism isn't real socialism, so I don't expect this to convince everyone. Now, I actually agree with the point that Animal Farm shouldn't be cited in any serious discussion about communism, which is exactly why I haven't seen anyone seriously using it. While it's obviously simplified, I do think it shows the corruption of power quite well, and I think it's good to be used as an introduction to the concept, just not taken to more serious discussion. The way I interpret it, Orwell was actually criticizing both runaway capitalism and communism in the book because at the end, the corrupted pigs just end up forming their own corrupt ruling class.
The fact that communist countries had famines is mocked again and again, but it ignores the fact that after these famines, countries like the Soviet Union and China accomplished food security for the rest of their existence. Contrary to the much proclaimed no food, the average socialist citizen was receiving more food than their capitalist counterparts. By the way, the same publication also shows that not only did socialist countries have a higher calorie supply, they also had lower child death rates, higher life expectancy, population per physician, population per nursing person.
When I first saw this argument, I was excited because I thought there was finally a point that could be proven empirically, and I was thoroughly disappointed. This is a study that has been beaten to death by other creators so many times before, so I'll quickly explain why here. As you can see, this is a chart comparing the quality of life between socialist and capitalist countries by various criteria, and at first the list seems to show a clear pattern of socialism being superior. That is, until you really look at the chart and realize that the socialist countries are only being compared to lower bracket and middle bracket capitalist countries. And most of them aren't really fully capitalist countries because any country that wasn't socialist was lumped in with the capitalist country group. The highest bracket capitalism countries aren't even compared because there were no equivalent socialist countries to the top capitalist countries. Not to mention that so-called capitalist countries were being compared with socialist countries with a much higher median GNP. Of course, you can always just skip all that and say, but because that number is bigger here than there, then A is definitively better than B. Also, here's an honorable mention that in the video, he says socialist countries had a higher population per physician and population per nursing person. Even though he really meant to say lower population per physician, because higher population per physician means less physicians. The guy was reading through the statistics so fast to prove his point, he ended up mixing up his terms. Now I'm assuming it's an honest mistake, but my advice here is to just slow a little bit down when you're reading statistics, okay?
Although it's a common stereotype that communists are bad with economics, it's often because they get the short end of the stick. Many countries were faced with decades of maldevelopment and exploitation when communism arrived. The devastation of war meant widespread poverty and misery in Eastern Europe, China, and Russia. Communism rebuilt these countries from the bottom up, leaving them in much better shape than when they found them.
Now as for the argument that communism built formerly destroyed nations, yes, it's true that many destroyed nations resorted to communism out of desperation and that it did increase the standard of living. For many, it was not a very good long-term strategy beyond that, which is why many communist nations either converted to capitalism in practice or simply fell. I'm not going to deny that the West absolutely had a hand in getting rid of communism, and it doesn't help our case that we spent a lot of effort and time attempting to stop communism for either self-interest or bogus ideological reasoning. But at the same time, when we say communists are bad at economics, that's not because communists are stupid. Centralizing and running an entire nationwide economy, even with an extremely powerful state, is just inherently extremely hard to do because of how complex society is. Nobody can do it even close to perfectly, no matter how smart or powerful they are. It's not about ideology in this case, just about pure practicality. That's how capitalism managed to outlast communism, by simply sharing the load of this complexity between many parties instead of one. It's like trying to supply a nation with one power plant versus 100 power plants. No matter how powerful the plant is, it is still a singular point of failure, and will have to work very hard, and if it fails, the whole nation goes dark. At that point, the debate stops being about ideology and more about logistics. It's just more efficient, for example, to have one team in charge of distributing cotton, one team to distribute corn, and one to distribute beef within a city, than have one office in charge of distributing all agricultural products to the whole nation. If one company accidentally delivers half the amount of corn they were supposed to, for instance, another company can come in to fill the demand. But if the party leaves out a number by accident and is fully in charge of delivering all corn in the nation, then there will be a grain shortage, and I don't think you need to be an economist to understand this.
As an afterthought, it's funny how capitalist apologists will laugh at breadlines in communism but ignore the fact that there are already breadlines under capitalism. It's called the grocery store, and you actually have to pay for the bread, and those who can't afford it just starve to death.
I also don't need to explain why grocery stores being compared to bread lines is absolutely ridiculous beyond all reason.
In the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx states, "The theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property." Many people have taken this to mean that communists don't want anyone to own anything, even to the point of sharing our toothbrushes communally. But anyway, if you actually read the manifesto, literally 1 second earlier from that quote, Marx says himself, "The distinguishing feature of communism is not the abolition of property generally, but the abolition of bourgeois property." How communists use private property in this context is different from the common definition. Communists don't want to take away your toothbrush or things that you possess. Those are personal property. Private property are things used to make more money and give power to those that own them, like a factory, banks, offices, and infrastructure.
The issue with this argument isn't that communists want to or don't want to take our toothbrushes. The issue is that we don't know the line between personal property and private property, or in other words, the means of production or whatever contributes to the means of production. And whoever decides that line will be free to take whatever they believe as private property and can do with it whatever it pleases. We can clearly see the effects of this in the 1930s Soviet Union, where it was decided that apparently farming equipment, farm animals, and even food in some cases belonged to the state, things much more important than toothbrushes. If your system decides that it can seize property like that, that is inherently authoritarian. We still don't know where to draw the line, because technically a lot of personal property in our lives can also contribute to the means of production. For example, a shovel may be yours, but it can also be used to dig a ditch for the community. It's not a rigid line between, say, a factory and a bunch of cutlery. If we follow the logic to its absolute extreme, technically absolutely everything can be counted as the means of production. Your clothes keep you warm so you don't freeze to death, which means you can work and produce. So does that mean your clothes are related to the means of production? Your mind can come up with ideas and your body can put it into action, which contributes to production. So does that mean we are property of the state? I know I'm getting into absurdity here, but it just goes to show how vaguely this is defined, and how easy it could be for a dictator to push this definition into unreasonable claims over property. The central problem is that productive versus personal property is such a potentially fluid definition that whoever has the authority to put it into action can push it far beyond any sort of reasonable or practical claim, for example deciding that food is the property of the state. Somehow.
What other incentives could there be besides gaining money and power to get people to do stuff? I don't know, what about survival, bettering another person's life, passion, satisfaction with your work, curiosity, boredom, and output for creativity, necessity, and companionship? And speaking of pre-capitalism, humans spent hundreds of thousands of years living in a primitive form of communism where we lived communally. Incentives to work in human nature aren't static things, they're shaped by the mode of production that we live under. If we look at history, there are huge differences in human behavior throughout the world, and to simplify it all down to a monolithic human nature is ridiculous.
Yes, it's true that humans can and will do a lot of things with no monetary incentive. I myself do a lot of things with no monetary incentive, and if this wasn't true, things like volunteering wouldn't exist. It's also true that the myriad ways humans behave cannot easily be boiled down to a singular human nature that just so happens to be ideologically opposed to communism. However, just like the fifth argument, this is more of a logistical argument than an ideological one. Money isn't just purely an incentive system to make humans do stuff. It's just a system we invented to help run society as civilization got more and more complex. Yes, it's true that humans lived for thousands of years without money and had no problem, but then again, they were living in very small tribes and communities where there was no need for a monetary incentive because the tribe was small enough that everyone didn't benefit from the work. If, for example, a pack of deer showed up, everyone could hunt and then eat the deer. Or if bandits showed up, everyone fought them because everyone would be robbed if they didn't. It's also worth noting that even then, without money, trading and capital still existed. Tribes could trade resources the other couldn't get, and that ended up becoming a kind of simplified free market. But when we moved from huts to towns and cities, this old trading system will work. Because of how many different goods there were and how many different needs and wants there were. How would one know how many clams to trade for this much cotton or apples or so forth? The Sumerians eventually decided to just use barley as a kind of money because it lubricated the whole market process by providing something everyone could trade anything for because everyone wanted it. And then this evolved plus using precious metals and paper rectangles and computer bits. But the core principle remains the same. It works because everyone wants it, and because everyone wants it, you can give anything or get anything for it. Money also just happens to be a good incentive to coordinate large numbers of people. For example, let's imagine a farmer living in a small village that also knows how to help build a canal, but doesn't do it because he is too busy farming food to help feed the village. One day, a delegation from the kingdom's capital wants to recruit engineers to help build a canal. Without money, how will the delegation convince the farmer to move away for a prolonged period during which the village will now produce less food? Of course, they could just offer him food from their surplus, but what if what he really wants is new plows? Of course, if they were just hiring one engineer, they could give him whatever he wanted. But you cannot dig a canal with one engineer. Without money, how are they going to repay a team of 100 engineers who all have different needs and wants at the moment? Logistically, it is just easier to give all of them money for their work, which they can then spend however they want, while the managers happen to decide what everyone gets for their work, be it plows, food, donkeys, or whatever else they want. Of course, without money, you have two choices to convince everyone to work for something not personally affecting them. You can either somehow convince them to work for the good of the people and of the state, which will only work if everyone is fully indoctrinated in your ideology, or you can just force everyone to work. And that's assuming you can still somehow provide for all of their immediate needs. And guess what? Money was just too effective of a coordination system to give up, which is why they still had money in the USSR and even in North Korea. Of course, the state still owns all the means of production, but they still have to use money as coordination. So the monetary incentive argument doesn't really apply. And for the argument that capitalism wastes human potential because many potential innovators were lucky enough to be born poor under capitalism, that's not even relevant because I could literally say the exact same thing about communism. How much human potential is wasted from innovators who are unlucky enough to be born in North Korea, for instance? Wasted human potential is just a constant in all societies. Of course, I do believe we should reduce it as much as possible, but no matter how hard you try, some level of human potential will always be wasted, even in a near-perfect system, so it's neither a vice inherent to either capitalism or communism. Of course, you can still argue that there was more innovation in socialism. After all, socialists love to claim that they went to space first, invented the anthrax vaccine, and made one of the first mobile phones. And that's true, but I'm not sure if those were specifically because of socialism or in spite of socialism, because there are also cases of communism actually suppressing science, notably when the USSR adopted the pseudo-scientific agricultural doctrine of Lysenkoism over conventional biology, and also when they went after their own doctors in an anti-Semitic witch hunt, which ironically may have contributed to Stalin's death. You can also claim that capitalism suppresses innovation, but that's really a vice of unchecked power, not inherently capitalism or communism. Both have suppressed innovation for very different reasons, and again, I also believe suppressing innovation is something we should minimize. But simply blaming it on either capitalism or communism won't get us anywhere. Any system without the proper methods in place to check power can and will eventually suppress innovation regardless of ideology.
Interestingly, since it's difficult to attack the basic ideas of socialism and communism, like economic democracy and work empowerment, anti-communists have to find another way of shutting these ideas down. You know what I'm talking about. If you like socialism so much, why don't you move to North Korea? So these arguments about socialist hypocrisy almost always never bother to address the actual ideas of socialism and serve only to The problem is that using this logic, you literally can't criticize any system at all because you're a hypocrite for living in it. I don't think I like living in a slave society very much. Haha, but you're eating food your masters gave you. I don't think I like living under feudalism very much. Haha, but you're using tools made out of feudalism. I don't think I like living under capitalism very much. Haha, but your phone and computer were made under capitalism.
This is actually another argument I agree with. People who shout this line are usually not arguing in good faith and are just trying to shut down the conversation. I also agree that the socialism is a no iPhone logic is flawed because, just like he says, it could be applied to any system. Just because you have something made under one system doesn't mean you cannot criticize that system. If anything, it actually proves that he can point out bad logic and argue properly, just whenever it fits the narrative, unfortunately.
A common common argument against the far left is that, if you think about it, the far left is actually as bad as the far right. I mean, one side advocates social justice and economic equality, while the other side advocates for ethno-states and the subjugation of races of people. Jokes aside, there's an unironic strain of people who believe in horseshoe theory, that the far left is just as bad as the far right because both use violence and stuff. Such compelling evidence.
Let me explain why the fact that both extremes use violence is compelling evidence for horseshoe theory. Yes, it's true that intentions matter, and it's also true that the Nazis were in no way left-wing and were just using socialism as a propaganda tool. And it's also true that anyone who seriously thinks Nazi literally stood for socialism must probably also think that a seahorse is a horse by that logic. But the issue with the argument is that the far right is much more evil than the far left, is that it assumes that intentions fully decide the morality of an ideology. When we say that fascism and communism are two sides of the same coin, we're not measuring intentions. We measure whatever they will do to get to those intentions. In other words, we are measuring the means, not the ends. Both sides just so happen to use violence, and so that's why we call them two sides of the same coin.
In reality, instead of a horseshoe, I would argue that ideology is more of a fishhook, with the far right sharing more in common with the centrists, who are ready to support fascism as soon as profit levels drop.
Also, the theory that centrists are closer to fascists than far leftists because centrists are also capitalists really doesn't hold any water at all, because it could just as easily be turned around to say that centrists are actually closer to far leftists than fascists, because centrists think all races are equal. This argument is really just one big argument condensed together from 6 arguments in the original video, those being the following. Communism is only authoritarian because of Western meddling, people under communism actually liked it, people who didn't like it are cherry-picked, Venezuela failed because of imperialism and sanctions, communism is much more democratic, and communism only fell because of Western meddling. If you really take the time to think about it, all of these arguments are really just 6 sides of a very strangely minted 6-sided coin. In essence, all of these arguments revolve around the same basic idea, that communism is a fundamentally democratic system for the people, and all of its political flaws are due to external factors. That makes it far easier to address than all 6 of these arguments individually. Let's first address the first duo of arguments, that people who lived under communism actually liked it, and people who didn't are cherry-picked examples.
If we actually look over people who lived under communism think, we can see that a majority of them actually want communism back. As I mentioned earlier, a majority of Russians actually wanted to preserve the Soviet Union in a referendum held before the switch to capitalism. In fact, now a majority of Russians actually prefer the return to socialism and the Soviet Union after all this time.
Nostalgia for the Soviet Union is strong among the older generation here. They say that 2 decades of capitalism in this declining town have spawned rampant corruption and a lawlessness that didn't exist before.
Такая атмосфера сегодня я чувствую в России. Потому что во многих городах уже поставили, мы отстали в этом вопросе. Многие не понимают, о чем говорят. Надо почитать нормальные книги, нормальную историю узнать, хорошо знать ее. И только тогда можно сказать, что он многих убил. А я думаю, мое личное мнение, что он не добил многих. Тогда бы сегодня не было такого бардака, извините.
Since the collapse of communism, the United States and capitalist powers have attacked and even outright invaded various countries like Iraq, Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Iraq again, Libya, and the smaller interventions in between. Without communism to blunt the edges of capital, capitalists have been free to exploit workers and are continually rolling back rights. What a surprise that a system that benefited people's lives is actually popular with the people who lived under it, contrary to the blatant lies of those in power.
Yes, it's true that the transition from communism to capitalism was messy in many places, and that many want to go back to communism, if anything, for the stability, if nothing else. It is also true that if you keep an electric fence around a dog for years and then take it away, it still will not pass where the fence used to be. Some people in Russia today don't want to go back to communism because the ideology is objectively better, but because it was simply more stable at the very least compared to right now. That's not idealism, that's cynicism. You can be nostalgic for an old system without openly supporting it or all aspects of it. Humans don't usually have such black and white opinions. Humans tend to prefer stability, regardless of the system. I also agree that the transition in many places was mostly self-interested and poorly handled, leaving many worse off. This does not retroactively vindicate communism because nostalgia is not exactly quantifiable evidence of a system's merit. Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm not saying that lived experience doesn't matter at all, just that subjective experience is too varied to come to a conclusion by itself.
Yes, you there. What is survivorship bias?
And about the survivorship bias argument, that's literally not relevant at all. I could say the exact same thing about this old man from earlier who is nostalgic for Stalin. Yes, it's true that many in the former USSR want it back. I just wonder what happened to everyone who didn't like it. Don't you wonder sometimes what happened to all the dissenters? I mean, it's one of the great mysteries of our time, and we'll probably absolutely totally never figure out what happened to them.
The idea goes that communist governments are oppressive and that the poor and downtrodden are prevented from exercising the democratic rights they had before. The same pattern existed in other former communist countries, with Marxists enduring political suppression and elections being rigged to prevent the people from voting to bring back communism. Whenever communists won victories in fair and open elections judged by outside sources like in Albania and Bulgaria, they were forced to step down from the pressure of capitalists. All this virtue signaling about political rights from capitalists goes away when the people themselves want communism back.
Now onto the argument that communism is more democratic. First of all, I would like to clear something up about democracy. Democracy is just a tool, a system of governance among many others. It is not a universal moral entitlement, and is certainly not the end goal of every single society. We only put democracy on such a high pedestal, especially in the West, because out of literally everything we've tried throughout history, democracy happens to be the least bad one we've tried. Certainly not the best, but the least bad so far. And just like any tool, it is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Democracy cannot work under every single condition. It depends on robust institutions, general stability, and especially limits on power. If the people are not prepared, they could just vote in another dictator or something. Just look at what happened to all the countries we try to spread democracy to. And among the many conditions where democracy faces severe difficulty is communism, or any highly centralized system. Allow me to explain why.
The idea that communism is inherently authoritarian is misleading because it only developed these things after capitalism tried to crush it. In 1918 to 20, 14 capitalist nations invaded Soviet Russia to overthrow the communists, with the years of this civil war intensifying the Bolshevik siege mentality. The same pattern of imperialist capitalist powers invading to protect capital can be seen in other countries that try to move beyond capitalism. The Spartacist uprising in Germany was suppressed by the Sucdems with fascist paramilitary forces in 1919. Catalonia was crushed by fascists in the Spanish Civil War in 1939. Cuba in 1961 suffered from an invasion and afterwards decades of terrorism from the US. Chile in 1973, Nicaragua in 1986, the Vietnam and Korean Wars, and so much more. The reality is that revolutionary countries are not going to be allowed to develop a socialism that is unhindered. Instead, what we see is a sort of siege socialism, with authoritarian measures being adopted just to fight back the onslaught of the West. In the whole context, we can see that the totalitarianism of communism is not a natural development, but an unnatural one caused by the constant barrage of capitalist terrorism. So when communist states fail to defend themselves from capitalist massacres and genocides, then capitalists laugh and pin the blame on communism's inherent weakness. But when communist states do defend themselves, when they implement strict security measures to protect their people from capitalist death squads, then the capitalists run crying, decrying the commies for being power-hungry monsters who were just authoritarian seeking to seize state power all along. So if communism is bad and weak when it fails to defend itself, but it's also bad and authoritarian when it does defend itself, then when would communism ever not be depicted to be villainous? The answer is never, because no matter what communist states do, it's always spun to be bad. This is not an argument. It's a dogma.
Pushing aside Marx's call for a literal dictatorship of the proletariat, communism tends to be authoritarian not because communists are evil, but because the very system itself creates strong incentive to concentrate power. This is, again, more of a logistical argument than an ideological one, the result of idealism clashing with reality. For the sake of argument, I'll be addressing Spooky Scary Socialist directly for this thought experiment, to see what he would do in this situation. However, I'd really like to see what you would do in the comments. Imagine you've just been picked to lead the country after a communist revolution. all the capitalists have now been expelled and now all the capital is in the hands of the people. And I'll be making a charitable assumption here by giving you a reasonably ideal head start. So your country has a good amount of resources, you and your party cadre genuinely have good intentions, and there are no evil imperialists waging war against you immediately, so you can focus all your attention inwards. Now let's get to the first problem. I understand that Marx didn't mean a literal dictatorship and instead thought more along the lines of the people owning everything. But that still raises our first immediate problem. Yes, everyone can own everything in theory, but we are humans, not ants. We don't typically act as a massive collective under most conditions. We all have initiatives, priorities, preferences, and different conditions. If everyone owns everything, that doesn't change the fact that stuff still needs to get done. So, if someone wants to use a factory to make clothes, and someone else wants to make bags, if they both own the factory, they would technically both have the right to use it, while also infringing on the collective's right to use it. They can't both use the factory at once. There are not infinite factories. Seeing this, I think you can start to see the problem here. Someone, somewhere, still has to decide how everything gets utilized, even if everyone owns it. Of course, you could always vote on the matter, or get someone to mediate a compromise. Don't forget that you also cannot take too long deciding what to do, because if two people are busy arguing over the factory is not going to make anything. So here we face our first incentive, and that is the incentive to increase efficiency to avoid bottlenecks like this. You may not be as obsessed with growth as capitalists, but you also cannot stall endlessly to find a solution that suits everyone because of how many parties are involved, or else nothing will ever get done. In the past, this would have been left to the free market or other similar ways of decision making. The man who wants to make bags would just have to sell the factory to the clothes maker if demand for the former was lower. That isn't the only way to make decisions in capitalism, but my point is that there were more ways of dealing with these problems. But now you need to be able to decide all of that yourself and as efficiently as possible. Given the huge burden, most people would not want to have to consider all that when trying to work. And that makes it all the easier for the people to accept someone to take charge for them. So they won't have to decide themselves, not because they want dictatorship, but because having to make all the decisions themselves is tiring, which is, by the way, a completely understandable response. And when someone eventually takes that burden, of course they'd want to make it easier for themselves as well. What would you do if you were running a centralized system with this many variables? Of course, you'd want to minimize the variables as much as possible to keep everything running efficiently. The problem is that much of the complexity comes from humans themselves, with their different priorities and objectives. You could try to skirt around it, but that would make the process slower and cause even more administrative load. Absolutely none of this requires overtly bad intentions. In fact, you might go even faster and stronger if you believe you are doing good. My core point is that highly centralized systems are more prone to creating the incentives for authoritarianism. Not because anyone is evil, but because of the difficulty of the task involved. Society is just inherently that complicated. So in the end, it is actually human nature, but not because humans are greedy, actually because humans are complicated. And that's an important distinction. This does not mean centralization as a concept is completely useless or even ineffective. In certain niches like the military or emergency services, it is incredibly useful. However, centralization works best when done in highly disciplined environments, where the amount of variables is already minimized. It cannot easily expand to fit a highly variable system without also forcing the system to contract to an acceptable scale for it to function. This doesn't just apply to communism, it can also apply to large monopolies in capitalism, bureaucracies, corporations, and centralized organizations in general. Let's go back to our thought experiment for a moment, and imagine another scenario. Even if most of the people are satisfied with communism, there will always be those who disagree. What if someone in your country decides to start a capitalist movement? What are you going to do with them, honestly? You could ignore them, but what if they gain a larger following? What if some people suddenly want capitalism back? Bringing it back would be a threat to your own system. So what would you do given the circumstances? I won't jump to conclusions here, I'd just like to know what are the possible solutions for this. Now, what does this have to do with capitalism? Capitalism hasn't been more resilient than communism historically because it's objectively better, but just because it's more flexible and decentralized. It can exist partially and can exist in a wide variety of forms, unlike the highly rigid communism. Aside from maybe Alcoholic Horse 49, I don't think I've ever genuinely seen anyone say that real capitalism has never been tried, or that wasn't real capitalism, because many systems are partially capitalist, even some communist parties, and it's so much more fluid of a system. Yes, it's sometimes messy, morally compromised, and has caused harm. But it's flexible, and so far we've decided that it's still worth keeping around because it's the least bad and the most flexible system we've found so far. Now on to the final argument, which is that all of communism's failures are because of capitalism. Beforehand, I will concede the obvious truths. Yes, anti-communism doctrine has irrationally suppressed communism without caring to understand it. Yes, there have been numerous terror campaigns against communists throughout history. Yes, I'll acknowledge that it's very hard to find a socialist or communist system that developed without external pressure, so unfortunately we have almost no benchmark. That much is obvious. But at some point, is there ever a line we can draw where we can say, okay, the system itself is responsible for authoritarianism? If you tell me the first, second, or even third time that communism failed, or became authoritarian because of capitalist influence, fine, I can take that. But if you tell me that again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again, then eventually the number of excuses stops being explanatory and starts being unfalsifiable. The logical fallacy here is that apparently, because the system is constantly persecuted, this must mean everything wrong with it can always be blamed on an external fault. Just because a system is always persecuted does not mean absolutely nothing is wrong with it. Absolutely none of this logically refutes the idea that centralized systems can be prone to authoritarianism, even without external interference. If you're used to arguing emotionally or ideologically, this line of thinking may seem foreign to you, and since it becomes marginally harder to attack the logic from a systems angle, I can foresee some of my responses being something along the lines of, "You're just an unfeeling technocrat who doesn't care about humans and only views people as variables in a system." And to that, I say, yes, systems thinking is not perfect. If done poorly, it can sound detached, and it has also been used for harm. I was not using it because I thought it was the best way to think. I used it because I thought I could bring a fresh, unique take to the table, and it does not in any way mean that I do not care about people. I just wanted to approach the debate from a different angle. With that, let's get to our final argument.
It's easy to debunk all these arguments, but we'll never get anywhere unless we examine why anti-communism is so prolific. Communism, first and foremost, is a threat to property owners, so ruling interests have made sure to pound anti-communist doctrine into our heads for literally centuries. I gave a little snippet of this idea earlier, but a full explanation is given by Michael Parenti in Black Shirts and Reds. In the United States, for 100 years, ruling interests tirelessly propagated anti-communism among communists, more organized analysis. During Cold War, anti-communist ideology offered any data that constitutes communist the Soviets refused to negotiate their intention and military favored the sectors. This was still by posing observations, they demonstrated aggressive but when in fact, it's orange trees, it was considered ridiculous and manipulative. This demonstrated the religious press over rejecting ideology. It overturned practice and communications to the but they didn't because they were intimidated. In this sense, anti-communism is not really a position to take, but rather an unfalsifiable religious doctrine. And as we know, anything that can't be proven false isn't scientific.
I find it hilarious that Spooky claims that anti-communism is an unfalsifiable religious doctrine, while literally arguing for communism in such a way that it is also unfalsifiable as well. Of course, he doesn't do the not true communism argument, but he's still blaming most of the failures on external sources. Capitalism can exist on a spectrum, from very capitalist to limited capitalism, just like socialism can be on a spectrum from democratic socialism to communism. So to claim that capitalism or even anti-communism is a religion is absolutely ridiculous. However, there is some merit to this claim. It is true that many anti-communist doctrines do feel like orthodoxy, and this is a genuine fault and unwillingness to actually understand communism on their behalf, rather than a fault of communism itself. However, the aspect I would like to refute is the generalization. I find it hilarious that many communists think libertarians are all anarcho-capitalists who have no understanding of reality and all shill for billionaires and big corporations, and that we think that our current system is completely fine. No, of course we do not think the current system is fine, that much is obvious. our current system is completely indefensible. In fact, I believe that our current system is actually more centralized than ever before, leading to all of the problems I just mentioned. Personally, I believe in a kind of Georgism, which preserves the decentralized advantages of capitalism while doing away with the worst aspects like rent-seeking. It's not perfect, but it's a compromise we can make without having to resort to a huge state monopoly. Of course, since Georgism doesn't appeal morally or emotionally like communism does, I won't expect to win over anyone with this. Going back to the subject at hand, this generalization seems to have extended into most of Spooky's arguments. He takes the real phenomenon of anti-communist orthodoxy and assumes everyone who isn't communist acts like that, which is insane! What about people like me who want to understand and discuss it without joining it? Another thing I've noticed is that most of his arguments are based on the assumption that capitalists only want profit and will kill anyone in the way, while communists will always put the people first. Communism gets judged on intentions and theory, while capitalism gets judged on messy reality and outcomes. I don't think that's a very fair comparison. As if he thinks that every businessman wakes up dreaming of mass murder. What a cynical view of humanity. Yes, capitalism has flawed incentives that cause real harm. This does not mean every capitalist is unfathomably greedy and bloodthirsty, and this generalization is probably what I hate most in political discourse nowadays.
This video is the epitome of whataboutism, strawman fallacies, and ad hominem attacks. We live in a society, Venezuela, iPhones, animal farm, human nature.
Wait a second.
Hey, no, don't touch me!
Porky, I knew it was you all along. And I could have gone away with it too if it weren't for you meddling commies.
Take him away, NKVD. Thank you, sir, and please be on the lookout for any more counter-revolutionary activity.
What is this? Does anyone actually find this funny? This whole skit is just what he thinks every response to the video would be. If you assume people who don't agree with you are going to automatically argue in bad faith, that gives you a logical justification to not follow the rules either. Which is unfortunately what I have been observing this whole video. In addition, this meme is just incredibly unfunny, because the joke is really just, haha, person who doesn't agree with me is a pretentious prick, and actually an evil capitalist pig, and gets arrested by the NKVD. That's not a joke, that's propaganda. I know I sound very harsh right now, but that's the message I'm getting from this unfunny leftist humor. Technically, every piece of information meant to push an agenda is propaganda, which means that my video is also propaganda, so this isn't a specific insult on his video specifically. If you've been agreeing with my video so far, then you have just fallen for my propaganda. But there's still a distinction between actually good political humor and just straight propaganda. He also thinks that people who respond to his arguments are going to call him out as ad hominems, whataboutism, and strawman fallacies. Which is unfortunately what many of these arguments have been. What this uncovers is actually something much more disturbing than if he was simply wrong. What is very disturbing is that very likely he is self-aware and knows how to argue logically very well, as he can spot bad logic, but he willfully ignores these rules to push his agenda. He knows precisely that his arguments are fallacious and knows exactly how they are, but as he asserted throughout this video and many of his other videos many times, capitalism is apparently the harbinger of the apocalypse or something and also argues in bad faith. Therefore, he is justified in breaking the rules himself to oppose capitalism. This is classic ends justify means logic. After all, if you win, you need not have to explain. However, I still don't think he's a bad dude at heart. He very clearly wants to make the world a better place. The only issue is that he's just picked a very hard and unviable way to do it. And unlike many hardcore communists, at least he isn't advocating to put all capitalists and kulaks in death camps. Or at least, I really do hope he isn't advocating for that. This seems to be a common theme among socialists. They are mostly young intellectuals who genuinely want to make life better for everyone. Sorry to any fascist watching, who thought that I was gonna say that anyone on the left is a heckin' evil commie drone. But they've been tempted with the idealism of socialism without the education and the patience to be more skeptical. Socialism offers the world to those tired of rampant corruption and greed, but really will just replace one flawed system with another even more flawed system. That's how it has managed to survive so resiliently despite its less than flattering resume, by appealing to those who mean well but have little financial literacy. In the end, I think this video is a good case study in the rejection of intellectual honesty for moral certainty, or to put it bluntly, absolutism, which I've noticed is sadly a common theme among ideological extremists. When you get to that extreme of a level, you start caring only if you're right and absolutely nothing else matters, not even intellectual honesty, because in your mind if the other side is fundamentally evil, you can do anything necessary to defeat them. This is a mindset you use for war, not a debate, but unfortunately for people like Spooky, even a debate is viewed as a war because their twisted worldview demands one eternal enemy to defeat and one righteous cause, without acknowledging the complexity of the factors involved. And when this happens, nothing you say will convince them because giving up is too psychologically taxing. So in other words, your virtue was recognizing the dishonest tactics of the other side. Your vice was believing that those same tactics were fair game for you to combat their tactics. And I know I'm going to get the obvious rebuttal of, you're just making up psychological excuses to demonize communism. But this isn't a pattern unique to communism at all. I often see it on the right as well, especially on the alt-right, which is why they never really appeal to me. And among capitalists, like the capitalists who attack communists out of ideological warfare, thus forming the examples of capitalist terror he loves to cite. Being open-minded and taking the middle ground doesn't mean you have to switch ideologies every 2 seconds and not stick to any beliefs, or even that you should be a useless centrist, but at the same time there is a difference between normal adherence and unhealthy ideological addiction. Given what I just said, I've come to accept that absolutely nothing that I say or do, or anything that I will say or do, will ever convince spooky, scary socialists. And that's fine. That was never my point to begin with. This video is mostly meant for his more moderate audience, and anyone else who is interested in honest discourse. And to spooky, scary socialist himself, I'm going to stop right here and leave you with this one final thought. Seeing that I am a libertarian, if you can make a case to me that I'll still be able to keep most of my liberty under communism, maybe I'll start taking you seriously. Of course, if you don't want to do that, I'll also offer you an easier way out. If you want, you can simply label me a selfish capitalist chud who only cares about freedom, and win the argument automatically. Either way, you win. Your choice, spooky, scary socialists. Your choice. But before I leave you with your thoughts, please take a moment to watch the remainder of my animation. Thank you all very much for watching. Here's your gift for having made it to the end.
What? No. What are you doing? You're supposed to be fighting him. You should never have an actual conversation with a communist. They will brainwash you. You traitor. That's enough. I guess I must deal with you myself, Spooky.
Why couldn't you have done this sooner, then? You could have just fought him yourself, but no, you had to let the bootlickers die. See how little power you have when nobody's on your side?
Enough, traitor. I'll take you out as well, then. Watch this.
Get off my streaming setup right now. Your filthy capitalist shoes you stole from the people are getting dirt all over my streaming setup. I will decapitate you like I did Praxben.
Come at me, then. I'll take you both on. It'll be easy. You're just a ghost, and you're just the weak cousin of the ANCAP brain. The only good centralized system is the one where I get all the power and not him.
Well, what do we do now? He's trying to get both of us. Let's take him together then. I never thought it'd come to this. All together now. Jump him immediately. You had enough yet?
Nice shot. I'm just getting started. Give me your face.
Let go of me, you creep. Give me back my hammer. Spooky, I got your back. Just a minute. Oh, no. I'm out. How is he still up? Leave it to me. Yeah, we got him. What should we do now? What? No. It can't be.
How do you like this?
Hang tight. I'm gonna use all reliable spin attack.
Nice spin. So I have 8 limbs, and you got none, and I'm going to put them all to use.
Man, what do we do? Look how fast he's moving. Even I can't hit him at this. My regular spin attack isn't fast enough or accurate enough. Hold on a minute. I got an idea. We're gonna have to expand some serious detours. You're a ghost though, so you should be fine. I see a launcher over there. Let's go now. Bro, are you sure this is safe? Well, it looks like this is the only way we can hit him. Get ready to pull once he gets in range. This was a launcher owned by Overlord and Eric von Wilhelm Theobald von Bateman Hall Reg. I'm gonna pull. Get ready. Get the sickles out. 3, 2, 1.
Nice and flashy, but you can't even scratch me.
Looks like we're going to need some help. He is too strong. I could really use you. Bootlicker Trio. Hear me, great spirit of Karl Marx. I call upon the power of Juche necromancy to assist me in the fight with the capitalists. Behold my Kami zombies. Now go forth.
Ow, my ribs. Now I have to pay $670,000 to fix them. Enough. You traitorous commies. Unleash total unrelenting Hasbro on me.
Oh, no. Where did he go? What do I do now?
Read.
How did you get back so quickly, and who are all those people with you? I don't know, I got some anonymous help. I got a small bunch of chuds. Though they're not going to be much use if he keeps up that Hasbara shield. Don't worry, I got just the thing. He did it. He really did it. What on earth is that?
To all subjects of Ankapistan.
Wait, did you hear him just now?
My name is Porky Silverstein. I'm using the power of Haspera to address all Culex of Ankapistan. I've undone the barriers on all the Culex in Siberia. And all Culex trapped within them have started marching. My goal is to protect the prophet of Ankapistan, the place I was born and raised. However, the workers of the world wish to see us annihilated. Not just those of Ankapistan, but until all Culex have been exterminated. I reject that wish. The fascists will trample all resistance outside of my island, until all the commies have been exterminated from this world.
Oh, no, no, no. He's eating the competition. This is as uncapitalistic as it gets. Take this.
You have been thorns in my side for too long. Enough. I shall curse you two with infinite glory, swab.
No, what do? We are smothered in Normigoy swamp. Oh no.
Finally, I have the upper hand. Ultimate finishing move, domain expansion. The pseudo-intellectual black hole, the consumer of all logic and reason.
Venezuela. iPhone 271 GB Pro Maximum. Animal Farm. 100 million billion trillion gorillion dead. Behold my free market intellectual superiority. You heretics will face the wrath of my supreme orthodoxy.
Well, it was nice knowing you. We are going to be sucked into his black hole. Now all his Culex are going to purge us all.
Did you know that for years, ever since the scourge spooky scary socialist dismantled all my arguments 5 years ago, us ANCAPs were devastated, hunted down and defeated in the free market of ideas. For years, I searched for a fabled hero of ANCAPistan, the creepy crazy capitalist, the only one with the power to challenge spooky. I found many promising people, but none of them, not even the bootlicking trio, helped. Until I found you with your hammer, Nerf gun, and ANCAP patch. I thought we'd finally end this nightmare. But you turned out to just be a random libertarian. Just a garden variety LARPer with the most normie arguments. Not even a real ANCAP, and you let me down. You even conceded some points. Then I learned there was never going to be a creepy crazy capitalist to save us. So I'll end this once and for all now.
Wait a minute. I have an idea. Right now, he's a black hole. Without any support, he would collapse in on himself from his own arrogance. Right now, I am the only thing keeping him steady because he has something to oppose. What he doesn't know is that because I am a ghost, I actually have infinite health. So, I think I'll be fine. Here goes.
No. Not the power of temporary ideological alliance. I cannot withstand such power.